Ta' ruħi.
Tinkwitanix ta'
U ma tafx int, kultant qasab noħroġ mis-sodda ma jkolli.
nilta' waħda l-ġimgħa d-dieħla?
Qed tara, tajtni raġuni għal xiex noħroġ mis-sodda. Ħa ma ntellifkomx aktar.
Tinkwetax, nistennew din, nibgħatlek imma.
Looking forward, oħt.
Tinkwetani dik, familta ma tantx aċċettawha u dan l-aħħar qed ittija x-xorb.
Ħażin. Ma titħajjarx tmur għand ir-Rainbow Support Service eżempju? Jgħinu ħafna.
Rainbow.
Ir-Rainbow Support Service. Għandhom professjonisti li jistgħu jigwidawha u jagħtu ħafna għajnuna, anke lil familjari. Jew jirreferuha għal Gender Wellbeing Clinic eżempju, li joffru ħafna servizzi għal persuni trans.
Daqt inħol il-Pete ir-Rainbow Support Service?
Toħodni fejn?
Ir-Rainbow Support Service forsi tneħħi dik l-ansjetà li għandek u jgħinuk biex tiffaċċja familtek.
Taħseb li hija daqshekk gravi?
Din mhux xi ħaġa ta' gravi. Għandhom ħafna servizzi u tajjeb tuża l-għajnuna meta tkun disponibbli. Għandhom anke youth center u gruppi biex titħallat ftit.
Dawn min huma?
Dawk għall-minibati minn eating disorders.
Mhux għalija mela?
Ma tafx tiġi bżonn?
Jaqgħu, hemm xi ħaġa li m'intix tgħidli? Trid immorru hemm ukoll.
Le, just naf wieħed, xtaq isir mudell. Għall-ewwel kien jieħu ħsieb xi jiekol, jitrejnjaw hekk. Ma wara ftit, beda jneħħi li jkun kiel. Imnalla kienu huma.
M'hemmx għalfejn issir mudell, inħobbu kif int.
Imbagħad hemm is-setqa għal min jabbuża minn drogi jew alkoħol. L-appoġġ għal min ikun f'relazzjoni abbużiva.
Hemm min jaħseb li għax f'relazzjoni taċċetta kollox?
Sfortunatament, u ssir ħafna ħsara. Daw is-servizzi jgħinuk toħroġ minn ħafna dbatija u nkwiet. Hemm servizzi ta' Community Mental Health Clinics li joffru support psikjatriku fil-komunità.
Il-ġimgħa d-dieħla nkellmu lil Jackie, forsi ssib min jgħinha.
Jackie?
Imbagħad nispjegalek, imma arranġajtilna dejt tal-ġimgħa d-dieħla.
Okay.
Dan il-proġett huwa parzjalment iffinanzjat mill-Programma Drittijiet l-Ugwaljanza u ċ-Ċittadinanza tal-Unjoni Ewropea.
Thank you so much to Michelle Cilia from the Gender Wellbeing Clinic. That video, of course, highlighted partly what the Gender Wellbeing Clinic is doing. Intriguingly enough, what Michelle mentioned earlier, almost 300 people, if not mistaken, are being taken care of, 275 to be exact, are being taken care of, and specifically addressing this key challenge of addressing inequalities in healthcare services. So the next keynote speaker happens to be all the way from Belgium. He specializes on gender and diversity. He's a visiting professor at the Ghent University. 10 years ago, he started an info point at the Ghent University on transgender health. He happens to be also founding member and currently president-elect of EPATH, the European Professional Association for Transgender Health. I'm glad I got it right. So we're really honored and privileged to have him with us, although virtually this morning, Professor Jos Jothmans. Good morning, Jos.
Morning.
Good morning. So the floor virtually and pun intended is yours now.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me, although again, online, as has been the case throughout the whole project. With the exception, as Gabby mentioned, of the kickoff meeting. So I was glad to have been able to visit Malta at least once and meet all the people in person who have been beyond this project. But I did hear your invitation, Michelle, of always being welcome in Malta, and I will keep that in mind. So virtually again, and as a professor, I have a PowerPoint, which I'll try to share if this would work, and I have no possibility to do so. I see. Okay, if that would not work, if Aaron, if you could share it, that's fine as well. If not, I'll just use my slides and talk to you like this. So my name is Jos Motmans. My pronouns are he, him. I do work indeed at Ghent University as a professor of gender studies, but I'm also So my main job is actually within the Ghent University Hospital, where I am the coordinator of the Transgender Info Point, which served as an example for this project. I'm also the current president of the European Professional Association for Transgender Health. And what I would like to do today is to share a few new insights in the evolutions of trans health care in Europe as of today. I have 3 insights that I've gathered, and I might have been able to share more, but I have to stick to the time limit as well. And the first new insight that I want to share with you is a discussion or a debate that we see happening in the larger society as well, that deals with the size and proportion of the amount of transgender and gender diverse people. When we look at scientific literature in this regard, we do see huge differences throughout time and also across geographic locations and contexts. But a recent review that I was involved in that focused on more recent data since 2009 up to 2019 and selecting only those papers using a sound methodology did highlight a huge difference between size and proportion data coming from either clinical samples, census data, or online reports. And when we look, for instance, at only the data coming from large healthcare systems, where, for instance, relevant diagnostic codes or clinical notes were used to select those falling within the umbrella category of trans or gender diverse people, we have an evidence range between 17 and 33 persons per 100,000 enrollees. However, when we look at population surveys, where numbers are based on self-reports, using either a narrow or broad definition of what it means to be a trans person, we see quite consistent but different and higher numbers than coming from clinical samples. And to give you an example, when we're looking at adults, for example, using a narrow transgender identity definition, which in most cases excluded gender diverse people, we have percentages from 0.3 to 0.5% of the populations falling within the narrow definition of being a trans man or a trans woman. However, when using a broader definition of being a trans person, being inclusive of gender diverse people, numbers go up to 4.5% of the population. And numbers are even higher when we look at studies focusing on children and adolescents. Of course, it's not the case that the 4.5% of the population who might fall within the broader definition of being a gender diverse person are all in need of care. There might be reasons why people do not access care services. They might not need care. And of course, what we know from a lot of social studies is that also many experience obstacles in accessing care facilities, or there might not even be care facilities in their country of residence. These obstacles might be social, economical, financial, and so forth. I heard from Michelle that since the start of the Gender Wellbeing Clinic in Malta, there are over 200 clients. And to just share our experiences here in Belgium at Ghent University Hospital, we have at this moment over 1,900 ongoing trajectories where our psychologists, surgeons, and endocrinologists are taking care of trans people. So I would say be prepared for the rise in numbers that you definitely will see. And it's indeed this upward temporal trend in the proportion of transgender and gender diverse people, which is very consistent, but was also already predicted a long time ago. There are studies from 2008 by Olislager and Conway, which already calculated that we would see a rise. So people from the field of transgender care are not surprised at all about this so-called sudden rise of people seeking care. However, there is a societal backlash against this so-called sudden rise, especially when it concerns young people. And this is definitely a new evolution that we are all confronted with. People are discussing the need and the aim and the reasons why young people are looking for care. And to share some research experiences from our own pediatric clinic, where We have 10 years of experiences in helping young people who are seeking help. I can tell you that we actually have, when looking at numbers, a huge percentage of people who are very satisfied with the care they got and who have followed a trajectory, very, of course, personal tailored, which is very important. There is no one size fit all model in care. And this is, I think, the key issue of having care. However, there is still a lack of good evidence in the long-term follow-up of those young people, and this is sometimes used against existing facilities, leading to sometimes stories of clinics which are closing down again throughout Europe, court rulings which are based on not evidence-based rulings. And this sometimes takes up a lot of the time and effort of people involved in transgender healthcare to counter these narratives and to publish and to answer all these critiques. When we look at gender affirmative healthcare services, and this is a new second insight that I would like to share, we have to understand gender affirmative healthcare to be inclusive of any single or a combination of a number of either social, psychological, or medical interventions, including hormonal treatment or surgery, which is designed to support and affirm an individual's gender identity. In this sense, raising knowledge and awareness among healthcare providers is very crucial and important. Existing protocols in our fields require regular updating, and this is an ongoing process. More clinical care experiences as well as new research gives us new insights and leads to new protocols. So this is a field in progress. This is not a field that stands still. In many countries, and I know that Malta is an exception, and I applaud you for it, but in many other European countries, the assessment process in transgender healthcare includes a clinical diagnosis to access gender affirmative healthcare. And in these countries, it's very important that healthcare providers who are assessing trans adolescents or adults for these procedures have the expertise in reaching the required diagnosis for their health services. Here again, training is necessary. The new ICD-11 has given us nice and better tools to require this clinical diagnosis, but we need to raise the competence and the confidence levels among healthcare professionals around this new diagnosis. And the recent study that we did in this regard actually has proven that training was preferred by healthcare professionals themselves, be given by trans people or trans organizations, and that this type of training is in most countries and professions not part of their regular curriculum and has been sought at their own individual interest. And there, I think, is a huge task ahead of us to make sure that this is not an individual case-based decision to have this training, but it is a structural component of every healthcare professional training. And then the last insight I wanted to share is more in my expertise as a social scientist and deals with new insights in understanding how gender norms work in our society. We have to admit that still nowadays in Europe, many trans people live in a gender hostile environment. If only we look at numbers from the FRA LGBTI survey or the Eurobarometer on the social acceptance of LGBTI people in Europe of 2019, we do see that although there has been a rise in acceptance when it comes to very personal matters, such as how comfortable you are when, for instance, one of your children is in a relationship with a trans person, only 43% of Europeans would be comfortable with that situation. And I looked at the numbers for Malta, and for Malta, only 1 out of 3 of all Maltese respondents would be comfortable with having one of their children in a relationship with a trans person. In contrast, when it comes to having, for instance, a trans person in the highest elected position in your country, 64% of all Maltese respondents would be comfortable with having a trans minister, for instance. From the FRA LGBTI survey of 2020, we know that almost 1 out of 5 of all trans people have experienced physical or sexual attacks in the previous 5 years. 1 out of 3 have experienced violence more than 3 times in the last 5 years. And over 60% experienced discrimination in the last 12 months. These lived experiences of trans people shape also their mental health and their willingness to seek professional care where needed. The theory of the minority stress model, originally invented by Meyer and has been adapted to trans people by Testa and colleagues, has shown that experiences of rejection, non-affirmation, and victimization are strongly related to suicidal ideation through experiences of internalized transphobia and negative expectations. It should not be a surprise then that a lot of trans people are afraid to seek treatment or care due to fear of being discriminated again or having intolerant responses. And from the FRA LGBT survey of 2020, we know that, for instance, in Malta, 1 out of 5 of Maltese trans respondents said that this is the case. What we need to do, and I think this is a role where we all can have a role to play, is that we need to build resilience among trans people, and in a broader sense, I would say among LGBTI people. Building resilience is very important. We have to acknowledge that minority stresses such as dual gender notions in our society and heteronormativity, experiences of violence and discrimination, the lack of social acceptance and support are triggers for a decrease in mental health. However, a lot of resilience factors have been proven to play an important role through scientific research. One of the main resilience factors that are important is the role of supportive relationships. And a study by Perkett and colleagues of 2019 has shown in this regard that an increase in family support has been clearly associated with an increase in resilience, even more so than the support people get from friends or community members. The support one would get from a family of origin is not to be denied as very important. Also, participation in communities that include similar others, or in other words, having access to support groups is a very important resilient factor. Governments across Europe should support trans support groups or LGBTI support groups, as they play a very important role in building resilience. And last but not least, also having a pride in one's own identity and celebrate identity pride is a very important resilient factor. So to conclude, I would say that as trans and gender diverse people are becoming more and more visible in society, having access to information is also becoming more and more important. Care pathways, protocols, and services need to be accessible and ready for the increase in people that they will see. And then there is a huge role to play in challenging gender norms in our society, and increasing knowledge and knowledge and understanding are crucial. So there, the need for awareness raising campaigns, educational efforts in schools are, and in the largest society are very important. And in this regard, when looking back at the Transform project, and all 3 of these very important points, the project has been very active. And I would like to take this opportunity to applaud everyone involved in this project, because having more information, having more training, raising awareness were very key components of the Transform project. So a big thank you to all involved in this very important project. And as a partner in the project coming from Belgium, I would definitely agree that the exchange that we had along the course of the project was definitely beneficial for ourselves as well. We have learned a lot throughout our cooperation and exchange. And with the pandemic as a very specific challenge, I think we managed to also use the online tools we have, which have given us also new opportunities for, as you said, Gabi, recording and sharing training even broader than initially intended. And if this would have been a Eurovision Song Contest, I would say from Belgium, 12 points to Malta. Thank you so much.
Love that, and 12 points back to you, Professor Motmans. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. And it was really fascinating to hear that it was a learning experience also for Ghent University. They're role models in this project, and it's great to have Professor Motmans sharing some of his insights, experience, wisdom, knowledge, and all that has been going throughout this project. The next video is related to what Professor Motmans said, but also on the importance that health professionals need to know the patients to make sure that they provide equal and non-discriminatory healthcare services to transgender people. Next video.
Hi, Michelle, kif aħna?
Manger Grux, ta'
Din Jackie.
Hi, Jackie.
Pjaċir.
Inħallikom tkomplu mela.
Grazzi, Jessica.
Qabel nibdew, bli ma jsemu pronomi tixtieq li nirreferi għalik.
Jackie. Ija.
Tajjeb. Tajdli xi ħaġa fuqek, Jackie.
Minn fejn naqbad nibda? Issa, il-ni sena li ħriġt. Missieri rrit joqtolni, bżajt li settieħ poplesija. Ommi jingħalqet fiha nnifisha. Issa mixi. Bil-kemm kelmitni minn dak iż-żmien.
Esperjenza jibsa hux.
Minix neżaġra, għamilt 3 ijiem nikbi. Naf li jħobbuni u ma rridx inweġġaħħom.
Nifhem li mhux faċli u wkoll li m'għandek xi tort.
Ommi u missieri anzjani, reliġjużi ħafna. Għalihom qed nagħmel bnub mejjed u għal xejn tipprova tfehmhom.
Taqdax qalbek. Hawnhekk nistgħu ngħinuk taffronta din is-sitwazzjoni diffiċli. Fit-tim tal-klinik għandna terapisti professjonali li jistgħu joffru sapport u jgħinu lill-ġenituri tiegħek jifhmu aħjar. Jgħinukom ukoll issibu modi biex ittejbu l-komunikazzjoni u r-relazzjoni ta' bejnietkom.
U kemm nixtieq.
Jackie, ilek sena li ħriġt. Bdejt tagħmel xi proċeduri, tibdiliet jew trattamenti?
Sissa għamilt il-laser u bdejt ftit hormones, imma iktar għaddi ma nafx għax nibża ftit, speċjalment fil-operazzjonijiet.
Tibżax. Ejja nimxu pass pass. Mhux kull persuna tiddeċidi tasal fl-istess mod u m'hemmx set regoli fissi. Ara, jien se noffrilek l-informazzjoni li għandek bżonn biex tiddeċidi x'inhu l-aħjar għalik. Imbagħad flimkien nagħmlu pjan biex naraw fejn tixtieq tasal. Aħna se nimxu kull pass miegħek. Fil-klinik għandna tim ta' esperti mill-aqwa. Jistgħu jagħtuk pariri u jgħinuk tul il-proċess kollu. Nofru ħafna servizzi. Għandna l-endocrinologist, konsulent li jgħinek tieħu hormones b'mod sigur u bla ħlas. Għandna tim psikosoċjali, counselor, social worker, psikologi u anki psikjatra jekk ikun hemm bżonn. L-speech therapist speċjalizzat fit-terapija tal-vuċi għal nies trans. Barra minn hekk, nistgħu nirreferuk għall-Art Clinic f'Mater Dei. Tista' tiddeċiedi li tifriża l-isperma biex iżżomm il-fertilità għal quddiem.
Kont naħseb li ħadd mhu se jaċċettani. Kont nibsa, dejjem żammejt ġewwa fija. It-triq ma kienx faċli u għad baqa' ħafna. Iżda mxejt ħafna wkoll. Sena ilu kelli depressjoni qawwija, kelli ħafna ħsibijiet koroħ. Fittix lajnuna, sibt lil min jgħinni u llum qiegħda hawn qudiemkom. Dawk li illum jinsabu kif kont jien sena ilu, ngħidilhom taqtawx qalbkom. Hemm lajnuna, minnkomx waħedkom.
Tista' tgħidi x'jagħmlu f'dal-Gender Wellbeing Clinic?
Il-klinik ena ssib li l-annifisa. Il-karizma dejjem hemm kienet ġo fiha.
u l-familja tal-met taċċetta wkoll.
Ekku, kif in-nanna u t-sijamar, aċċettaw lil dan il-ġuvnott.
In-nanna ħitituli dan.
Dan il-proġett huwa parzjalment iffinanzjat mill-Programma Drittijiet l-Ugwaljanza u ċ-Ċittadinanza tal-Unjoni Ewropea.
So you might have noticed that on stage I'm joined now by Dr. Mario J. Kakia from the Gender Wellbeing Clinic, Michelle Ciria from the Gender Wellbeing Clinic, and also from the SOGI JESC unit within the Human Rights Directorate, Gabi Kalea. I'll leave it in your good hands for the next panel discussion.
Thank you, Keith. So we're running a bit late, so we might have a shorter panel discussion than we intended because we have time restrictions also related to the next panel. But I'll start off by giving a brief introduction to the panelists you haven't yet met. So I'll start with Dr. Mario Kakia, who is a consultant physician in diabetes and endocrinology at Mater Dei Hospital and a visiting senior lecturer with the Department of Medicine at the Malta Medical School. He is the clinical lead at the Gender Wellbeing Clinic run by the Maltese National Health Service. You can find his extensive bio on the information webpage, but he was appointed the clinic lead of the Gender Wellbeing Clinic at its inception and was a member of the multidisciplinary team which set up and developed the parameters for the operation and conduct of the clinic within the confines of the relevant law. And as has been mentioned, the clinic started to see the first clients in November 2018. I won't introduce Michelle. She has, I think, introduced herself through her keynote speech. We also online have with us Professor Carleen Dont, who is a professor of child and adolescent psychiatry at Ghent University Hospital in Belgium. She is a leading physician in pediatric somnology and in the healthcare of gender diverse children and adolescents at Ghent University Hospital, where she has been working since 2005. As a supervisor and coordinator of the pediatric gender team, she is involved in clinical activities as well as in scientific research regarding gender diverse children and adolescents. And then also online with us from the Council of Europe SOGI unit, I believe we have Eleni Tsetseku, who leads this team within the Council of Europe structures, and who also as SOGI JESC unit we work quite closely with in our policy work. And I'll leave it till later for her perhaps to say a few words about herself and the work that is being done by the unit. So to get to our discussion, let me start with you perhaps, Dr. Kakia. So we've seen that trans-specific healthcare in Malta has actually come quite a long way in the 3 years since the setting up of the Gender Wellbeing Clinic. What would you see as some of perhaps the successes and lessons learned throughout this period?
Right. I think the main success, I think, was how the whole system was developed. Basically, I think the fact that from its inception, it was devised as a multidisciplinary clinic, and we did not start before we actually had all the members of the clinic started, appointed, I think made a big difference. Because seeing my other services, for example, diabetes and whatever, we've been running for somebody to provide us a psychologist for the last 30 years, and we still haven't got a psychologist in the diabetes clinic. So I think that has helped us rope in all the relevant members of the MDT before we actually started. And then once we started, we had everything set up. And I think the instrument that helps us most and is giving the clinic, I think, the best service of all is the initial assessment. Now, the initial assessment is an hour or 2 hours, depending a bit on the client and on certain circumstances. It's basically an interview, and it looks at the social and medical and other issues and health-related pointers, etc., of the client. And I think, one, it sets the client up to know the setup of the clinic. And the fact that I think there isn't a doctor there helps as well, because the clients tend to open up more. And basically from there, Michelle mainly coordinates that, but usually it's 2 or 3 people there. We can set a line of management. Now, I think the most important bit that we need to set up at that stage is expectations. A lot of clients come and they basically want to see me. They want their pills, they want the technology, and they want to move on. But I think that's the least problematic part, in the sense that once we have a client who is at the clinic, there is no problem giving the medication. That's the least of my problems. I mean, you might get side effects, okay, all well and good, but that's the least of most clients. Their problems are not related to medication. They're related to their social status. In the pandemic, we had at least one case where we had a client who basically couldn't even feed herself, all right? And they contacted Michelle, and Michelle contacted a few other people, and we used the food banks, etc. She might tell you a bit more. And there are the social issues, there's the speech therapy, which can be very useful in some circumstances. And surprisingly, the psychiatrist has come out as being very important. I mean, from, I don't know the exact numbers, not everybody goes to psychiatrists, obviously, but from the number of clients our psychiatrists see, there's a substantial portion who want to continue being seen for at least for a while. And this goes to say basically about the social interactions of our clients with society and its impact on the trans community, basically. I've got a feeling the younger clients have less of an issue. I think the Maltese community is becoming a bit more accepting, a bit more open, a bit more understanding. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Before we proceed further, we also have a small video message from Richard Scholler, who is a member of Transgender Europe, one of our associate partners in the project, and I'm told we should proceed with that short video message next. He was supposed to be part of this panel discussion, but was unable to join.
Good morning. My name is Richard Köhler. I'm very sorry I will not be able to be with you today in this really fascinating conference, but I have been allowed to say a few words in a recorded message. Thank you so much for that. Transgender Europe is representing our 183 member organizations from 47 countries in Europe and Central Asia. And let me assure you that from Norway to Kazakhstan, from Ireland to Cyprus, there is no country where healthcare is not an issue for trans people. We are seeing unprecedented attacks against the human rights of trans people across the globe and also in Europe and Central Asia, and healthcare is not an exception. And these anti-equality attacks target also the rights of women, they target LGBTI people, and in general, these attacks serve for some just to push further against democracy and open societies. And here, medical professionals actually play a key role for us to all get started. They should lead by example in breaking down stereotypes, and we need doctors and medical staff to be by our side to break down these negative and often medicalized prejudices against trans people. Let us set the tone and help to shift a narrative, help towards human rights perspective in trans-Pacific healthcare. This is why Transform is so important. It gives healthcare providers and trans people and trans activists across Europe and Central Asia very practical examples on how human rights compliant trans-Pacific healthcare can look like. These good practice examples are so important in practice and for medical practitioners across the globe, because this is how we advance, this is how we learn, and how this is how we actually end up with like good and quality care throughout Europe and beyond. Thank you very much for being trailblazers, for creating this path so that others can learn. Transgender Europe stays by your side and is really interested and ready to continue to work on this collaboration. I wish you all the best for a very fruitful conference. Goodbye.
Thank you, Richard, for that. Michelle, let me move to you. You're sort of, we found to be the first point of contact for many who contact the Gender Wellbeing Clinic services. What are some of the experiences of trans persons around healthcare provision in general? How can we ensure that other mainstream health services are inclusive of trans and gender variant patients?
As I said in my keynote speech, we have around 275 clients in total. If we look a bit at the statistics of the clinics, we are noting that over a half of our clients are under the age of 25 and over a third under the age of 20. So first, from these statistics, we are right now thinking how much we need to build capacity in relation to issues related to working with trans people who are of a younger age. During this training, we also noted that people working with older patients were stating that perhaps in their areas LGBTIQ matters are not taken into consideration. And therefore, we need to look also at the issue of intersectionality even further following these projects in relation to the older LGBTIQ people, the younger, as well as other groups which may be at greater risks in mainstream healthcare provision. For example, the migrant communities, even some people from certain geographical areas. If we look at our clinic, for example, we have only 5 or 6 clients who come from Gozo. So we still think that maybe people from the neighbor island are not coming forward. So maybe we need to look at that as well. Patients, people who are intersex, for example, will struggle in our mainstream healthcare services because currently we do not have any specific services for those group of people. And here I must say that currently the ministry is working on the protocol. In regards to mainstream healthcare services, we noted from our experience in the clinic that our clients tended to go to the same healthcare professionals, same GPs, same gynae, because they speak to each other and they know that that person would be gender sensitive, which should not be. Hence, that's why this project was also important. However, we must know that if a person does not feel that this space is inclusive, he will or she will not go there. And there is also listening to other stories, negative stories, and there will be anticipated stigma. When we started the clinic, we also noted that there were things that we were not aware of them, such as certain routine practices were discriminatory. For example, certain blood tests like prostate blood test or sending a smear test result to the lab, which were gender sensitive. And so we need to also challenge these routines. And that is why I stress again that we need to look now at micro level to see where we are lacking in regards to mainstream healthcare in each different units, because from the training we noted that each different setting has different documentation, different procedures. So if we do not understand the specific challenges in that areas, it's useless that we continue to make something uniform, which may be not possible to be implemented in practice.
Thank you, Michelle. Now I can see you, Dr. Caroline Dunt. So you are, in particular, an expert in working with children and adolescents. It would be useful for us to know what are some of the things that you are doing to support trans children and youth in particular. So I give you the floor.
There with you, actually. Well, I have been doing this work since almost 15 years, and I started with 1, 2, 3 patients or applicants a year, and then now we have about 100 young people and adolescents or children with parents and families who come to us. And so you can imagine this has been a change in the past years that is enormously. And well, what I think, because I have been thinking, what is important in working with children and adolescents, I think basically it's to provide a safe place for parents, a safe place for children to develop, not only in their gender, but in their development in general, and to find a place that can find out who they are, what they stand for, and in their gender identity, what are they finding themselves comfortable in. And well, I think the most of the biggest challenge we are having now, and Joss already mentioned it, is the polarizing atmosphere around everything that has to do with coaching, treating children, young children or adolescents regarding their gender identity. And I think that the answer to this, I have been thinking of that really a lot of time, and I think the answer in that is really participation. And I want to stress out this because I know for decades we have been managing our team and how are we going to work and how they're going to inform, to support schools, practitioners, pediatricians, etc. But sometimes we forget participation. And I think in healthcare in general, that is very important. If we build a hospital, an architect will ask us, the nurses and doctors, how do you want to structure it? But we almost never ask people who ask our help, what do you think about what we are doing now? Do you think that's the right way? What do you need? What should be done better? And I think in the future, also qualitative research will be much more important to just to add value at how we work with these young children and adolescents and their families. And I think that would be an answer in this polarizing atmosphere now we are running through, because for healthcare practitioners, it's not easy. Yeah? You can't do it right. You have always criticism you have to counter, or you want to stand for your work and what you are doing every day, and which energy it costs. So I think that's the next level we should develop, and hopefully we can do that together, because I saw in the exchange with this Transform project, you had a very nice manifest that you were using in schools. And for me, that was very interesting. And I think we could learn from each other in that way, certainly.
Thank you. Eleni, it's good to have you with us. So we have present here, at least in this room, many people who have probably never heard of the Council of Europe SOGI unit. Perhaps you could just introduce a little bit the work that you do, and especially how you can support perhaps other Council of Europe member states who would be interested in being allies to trans people.
Good morning to everyone from Strasbourg, from the Council of Europe. I do hope some people in the room have heard about Council of Europe work on sexual orientation and gender identity. In any case, Malta is everywhere well known as a great example of inclusive policies on LGBTI equality. The Council of Europe is promoting your work. I would like to congratulate you for this 2 years project, which of course takes up an issue which is not quite visible in the member states. From our work with the member states, we noticed that this is a topic that is often overlooked, not only in terms of trans health care, but in general in respecting the Council of Europe standards in access to health care for LGBTI persons. Well, the Council of Europe gynecology unit is a small unit like yours in Malta. We learn a lot from your expertise and through the peer-to-peer exchange of good practices. Gabi, you have already worked with us in changing the legal and policy framework in some of the member states. I will give the example of North Macedonia, which is a country that had not at all a legal framework for legal gender recognition for trans persons. And following the European Court of Human Rights judgment, North Macedonia had to implement this judgment, and we helped the country together with you to work on a new legislative framework. And this is now a reality. Very soon will be voted by the Parliament. So this is exactly the work we are doing at the Council of Europe. In 47 member states, well, not all member states recognize that LGBTI persons exist in their territory, but nevertheless, we support efforts even in the countries where we know that the official policies are hostile to LGBTI equality. The tools that we have in place, as I already mentioned, is the peer-to-peer learning, the monitoring exercises we are doing through our various monitoring bodies. ECRI is the Committee Against Racism and Intolerance, is one of the bodies dealing with this particular discrimination, the Commissioner for Human Rights, and of course, last but not least, the work we are doing through our Focal Points network. This is a governmental network of 36 member states. Malta is one of the front runners of this network. And this network is doing every 4 years, is going back to the member states and asking how they have implemented the Council of Europe standards on LGBTI equality. Healthcare is one of the chapters of our recommendation. And of course, the member states are obliged to come back to us and to give us information on how they have performed. They performed generally very badly in terms of healthcare, as you all know. And the results, of course, you can see it in several judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. The latest one was against Lithuania. We worked with Lithuania, and it was linked to access to trans health care. So this is for the time being what I can say about our work. Of course, your project is an excellent example on what we are expecting from the member states. And we will, of course, take into account your project in the next review of the implementation of the recommendation of the Council of Europe.
Thank you, Eleni. Before I ask any more questions to our panelists, I wanted to open the floor for questions. We don't have a lot of time, but if there is anyone who would like to ask any question to our panelists, this is the time to do it. Those who are following online could potentially use the Q&A function, and one of my colleagues would be able to read out the question.
Question from Mitya Blazic. When tackling non-discrimination and inclusion topics, example LGBTIQ, with healthcare professionals, the usual first reply, in my experience, is they treat everybody equally and there is no need to privilege or expose one particular group. I feel a kind of rejection of the topic by healthcare professionals. Have you faced such challenges in the implementation of the project activities? And if yes, how did you overcome them? Thank you.
I'll let Michelle perhaps start off, because this is probably an issue that we encountered when we were delivering the training to healthcare practitioners, and this is also why it was useful to have someone who was delivering the training who actually came from the health sector.
Yes, this was a reaction which we face typically in our sessions. We need to keep in mind that all the healthcare professionals, our teachings were based on the male, female, normal, abnormal anatomies, let's call it like that. And so whenever we speak of inequalities, it was a vague term for them. And when we were speaking of health disparities, discrimination, we found that there was this negative reaction, such as we don't discriminate anyone. If anyone is entitled for free medication, we will apply for free medication. If anyone needs to be referred, we refer to that person, to that service. And that is why, as Gabi said, it was, I think, helpful that even when training was delivered, there was someone from the healthcare sector, because I could connect to the floor, because I am a healthcare professional. I come from the same sector. And we need to reassure the audience, or whatever, the participants, that this is not a battle between who is doing right, who is not doing right. This is not a battle between sexes. But here, I reflected on this, in fact, and there is this big need to train regarding internalized homophobia, regarding the socialization processes, because sometimes we give training about definitions, etc., but if we do not tackle the issues of internalized homo, bi, transphobias, and if we do not challenge the beliefs that are internalized throughout the years, we will not arrive to the destination we wish to. So I think we need to focus more on that.
Thank you, Michelle. Because our time is up, I'm just going to give each of the panelists just 1 minute to make perhaps a concluding comment, anything you would like to say and add to this discussion.
What I can say is that for the Gender Wellbeing Clinic, we're trying to implement perhaps getting some new medications, because we've got a limited armamentarium there, and seeing if we can develop a pathway for further medical stroke surgical pathways. We'll get there eventually, but obviously, besides the budget restraints of Malta being Malta, we've had the budget restraints of the COVID pandemic, which has drained a lot of funds, so it's challenging, let's put it this way.
Thank you. Carlien?
Yes, I would like to invite you and everyone to give a voice to children and adolescents, not only children and adolescents with gender issues or questions around gender, but in children and adolescents in the whole, because they can give solutions. And we know that if they are creative enough and we give them space, they will find solutions to give answers to this sometimes anxieties in general populations. And I think that might be an answer if we only as adults give them space enough. I would like to conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Eleni?
Just a last word. I would like to say that the Council of Europe will disseminate the results of your project and all these good practices, especially the training. We could envisage also to transfer your training. Council of Europe could facilitate this to other member states. Well, this is a work that we can develop in the new working group on LGBTI, on SOGS equality, which was set up just in December. We could also considering undertaking a thematic review on access to health care on 2023, and maybe with you, Malta, you could have a European roundtable on this subject. It will be a good opportunity to give visibility to this invisible topic, especially in connection with the children and in cooperation with the Children Division of the Council of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleni. Thank you to all our panelists. We now have a short 10-minute break, so we expect you back in 10 minutes time in order to be able to continue with our next keynote speaker and panel discussion. Thank you all.